Hey guys, so this is my elementary observation presentation. I hope you guys like it as much as I did, and hopefully if there's any tools or ideas that you guys see in the classrooms, feel free to take that with you and apply it in your own. Hey, so this is Ms. Williams' classroom. Her classroom is really fun, and I would encourage anybody who has a chance to go to Hickman, reach out to her, send her an email, go see her class. It's really nice. In this middle section of the presentation, you'll see a picture of Miss Williams, and I just think that she has a lot to offer me as a student observer, and she had so many cool tips from having a sub tub, which is basically materials that a sub can access without having to go in the cabinets when she's gone, as well as just a sub binder for the students for her to give to the sub. So you have nurses' passes, lesson plans, expectations, graphics, everything from A to Z, so that the classroom still runs as smoothly as it's supposed to be when she's gone. And I think that overall her classroom was very diverse, and I would encourage anybody to go check it out. Ms. Williams has a really big classroom with a lot of space. She taught Montessori for at least 8 years, and luckily she was able to have this classroom when she moved to Hickman. Usually new teachers don't get these classrooms this big, but she was able to bring everything that she had with her and new materials that she bought to encourage creativity in her classroom. In the bottom left corner, you can see the brush posters that she has explaining how to handle brushes and what brush does what type of mark making. If you can see right here, this tiny little area in the center picture is her closet. It is very, very small. And that kind of is a downside to the classroom, only because she does projects for every part of the school, and having more projects created and less room is a little bit challenging to maneuver, but she does a really good job. This far picture on the right side is her board, her LOs, her vocabulary words, any type of art that she wants to put. This is where she does her instruction. It's carpet time. It's everything. So she utilizes her space very well. Her stations are organized by color, and she calls each group by color. Above each station has a paintbrush, same color as the tool bucket that are on the tables, and she makes sure that she can face her classroom. She's in the corner far in the front near the window, and right next door is the kindergarten class, which is very loud, so makes it kind of hard for her to speak at times, but she does a really good job. Ms. Williams has a really big classroom with a lot of My time at Hickman was really fun. I love the students, and the environment is really great. I came during a time during Black History Month where they weren't teaching, she was teaching evidence on like history, like MLK, Rosa Parks, etc. That was usually left to the core classes. But for her class, she was teaching how to make African drums, African masks. For African masks, the art influencer was Pablo Picasso, and she ended up making African drums um, when she was talking about different heritages that are from African American culture, as well as I was present for her decorating the whole, um, I would say, lounge for Valentine's Day. I didn't know that she was required to, but the principal asked her to do so, and these are really cool props that she took care of and preserved from Valentine's Day to Valentine's Day, so she doesn't have to remake them. Hi, welcome to Walnut Glen Academy. My art teacher for this observation was Miss Kathleen Hodgins. You can see her picture in the bottom right corner of this slide. Usually when you go to her classroom, you walk straight to the building, you go all the way down. Her classroom is the first classroom when you enter the hallway on the left side. You open the door and you will walk past the art honors class, and her classroom is all the way in the back where this arrow is. And if you follow me, I'll show you around. Miss Hodges' classroom is really big, and this is only because she had been with the school for, I believe, a little bit over 10 years. Um, she also agrees that a classroom is inherited only because this classroom, as you can see, is very decadent, it's very colorful, lively. The classroom that she had didn't have the cabinets that you see in the image prior to. It didn't have a lot of space, it didn't have any tables, so students had to work on the floor. Um, and she really was able to create her spin on things as materials were wearing out. She was able to replenish it with things that she wanted, that the school was okay with, as well as staying with communication with her principals and custodians. Also, this classroom is really interesting because next to all of her LOs and 5Es and goals for the day, she has art history assignments as well as for students who finish early assignments, and that way students can always reference the board for any steps and any type of artwork that she encourages them to create as assignments, or just what to do when they're finished with another assignment before they just sit around and move on. So at Walnut Glen, the artwork that is usually made for first graders are collage of poppies using only torn paper. Um, Second grade was Ferocious Fish, which was just to teach saturation, line, color, and this was an idea viewed from watching Finding Nemo. Fourth, third, fourth, and fifth grade had upper level type assignment. Um, they would usually go to the computer lab every Friday or one Friday out of the month to do graphic design on the computer. And in the classroom, like in the bottom left corner, you'll see a bulletin board of pears and apples that are drawn. This is to teach shading on the computer using pens instead of mice or mouse for the computers. And this teaches the students how to diversify the artwork that they're making from paper to a screen. For third, fourth, and fifth graders are usually encouraged to work on artwork that usually have a prompt. She will put it on her board for students to see, as well as encourage them to ask an elbow buddy, use the elements of art and principles of design on her wall or any vocab words while they are working on the artworks. For younger students, like first and second grade, she encourages student-led learning with puzzle stations. Every station is timed. She rotates different puzzles for students to learn from, and then the group that's the fastest, who raises their hand first, usually gets a prize out of the treasure box. It encourages students to think, ask questions, be quick if possible, and just understand that there's more than one way of learning art. Her third When I have my classroom, I think that I will include the 5E. But one thing I know that I would change would probably be the actual process of the 5E. Obviously, I would have an engage and explore and elaborate, but probably mixing up the closure and adding it to the evaluation or the assessment at the end would probably help my students a little bit better depending on the grade and what information I want them to retain before they leave my classroom. I also will include having roles for my students because I encourage them to take responsibility for their classroom. It limits my ability to talk to them when I'm constantly having to get on to them about classroom etiquette, correct usage of tools, etc. when I should be able to teach them maybe 2 or 3 times how to do it, go over as a class as to how we take care of our materials, how we run our classroom, what do we want to see from each other, and then put it in their own hands to have them actually continue that process out. I encourage my students to sign an agreement saying that they understand what the classroom is because at the end of the day, when they mess up or don't follow through, I can always go back and reflect with them like, hey, as a class, we all agreed to do this, and it is something that I hope my students will take to heart and apply it, and it builds character and actually a good communication skills with you and your students by giving them responsibility and having them be responsible for it. I'll also include games like from Ms. Hodges. She said one of the games was who could put the chairs up the quietest and who could pick up the most trash. And she also had students who were given roles like the first person, like a table manager, students that had to pick up materials, distribute materials, helpers, etc. I think that's really good to include in your classroom. And also, as a team, just me and my students as a team, just to be able to understand, like, as a group, we're all on one page. So different ways of drawing art, different ways of communicating, different ways of seeing art through their eyes will be heavily dependent on the See Think Wonders, group discussions, elbow buddies, etc. Posters, posters, posters. I think it was very inspirational in all of both the classrooms that I visited. They all either had a specific type of poster that helps the students understand how to clean and maintain and also to take care of the areas. Um, they also had rules like how to communicate to one another, what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, and demonstrations of where equipment should go, how it should be used, what to do and what not to do, how to ask questions if something goes wrong during an art project. I think that would be very helpful to my students and getting them affiliated with these posters and just instructional materials that they can see themselves throughout the classroom without me being there to guide them would be really nice. That way, whoever comes into my classroom, once they see my posters and they see what we are about in my class and how the students take charge of things that they want to see and explore and ask questions, will eventually trickle down to all the other students that are new who are trying to find a routine. So, one question is, what might you ensure that your classroom is safe and organized to support learning objectives and accessible to most students? Well, from Miss Williams, she always told me that you present your classroom the way that you want to see it the day before. So, if you know that your classroom is going to have 50 or more kids, depending on your school district, or if you're going to have 20 to 30 kids, depending on another school district, always prepare yourself to know that you have all supplies available to students. If you are distributing items to students, make sure that they're close to your desk. You don't have to reach and go get it unless students are out of supplies. And just making sure that you're constantly communicating with your students about classroom safety. When I have my classroom, from both classes, I learned that the classroom size is usually inherited. It's not something that we can actually walk into the school and decide what we can or what we won't like to be presented in. Secondly, the state of the art education in the school that is usually visited, it's the art from Hickman is more advanced in a sense than the regular elementary schools because they have to learn. Teachers are now switching out students who speak regular Spanish and they're now learning Vietnamese, while the actual school curriculum for Walnut Glen has more of a digital feel to it. They are a transition school that encourages students to take advantage of the arts, music wise, as well as art. Since the classes are in the same ISD region, um, both of the classes are somewhat in between 30 to 45 minutes. Each school sees the same students once a week, and then through that transition of classes, usually the art teachers are considered outside activity teachers, I guess, meaning that they end up making props for, like Miss Williams, she made Valentine's Day props. I also noticed that communication between core classes and specialist teachers are a little bit off, only because it's like a drop-off system with students instead of like communication unless the principal encourages. So for my overall feedback, what was very successful in Miss Williams' class was she had a stop and go light, and under that light, she had a description of voices, like voice levels, red was no voice level, green was voice level 2, 1 and 2, and yellow was voice level 3 and up. And that way students could know where they were, how high they were, what was the next color, if that led to no talking at all. I thought that was very successful. Handled it differently. She had a young man that would throw little pieces all over the floor when he was doing his puzzle, and she was able to put him in a quiet place where he would sit and reflect. And students with ADHD, disabilities, or just students with ADHD, ADD, etc. Miss Hodges handled it differently. She had a young man that would throw little pieces all over the floor when he was doing his puzzle, and she was able to put him in a quiet place where he would sit and reflect, and she would make sure that he knew what time it was, how long he was going to spend there, and set expectations of what he did, talk to him about how he would change it, and let him come back. And my takeaway from just the observation altogether was that I am so excited to get my hands on a classroom and start teaching some children. And I say this only because your energy reflects how you're going to communicate with your students. I learned that I'm able to be sweet and very assertive at the same time. I noticed that limiting help within good reason teaches students how to be more dependent upon themselves instead of thinking that you will go around and glue for them, put beads on their work, etc. I think it was really cool how each student had a different relationship with their teacher. With Miss Hodges, she was very structured, and she was able to have her students, repeat after her when she spoke. She was very attentive. They knew what to expect, and I think the more restrictions, or the higher the school, the more restrictions the teacher has, and it leaves very thin lines for students to misbehave. Like when you go to an academy, it sets a already precedent that when you walk inside, there's going to be rules, because it's different from going to Walnut and versus Hickman. Things that I would love to see in my classroom is structuredness, like Miss Hodges, but a very open and loving communication that I saw in Miss Williams. I feel like having the benefit of going to 2 different schools was really great for me, and truly a big blessing. I think that I would incorporate all of their skills that they have taught me, make sure that I have rules on my wall, make students accountable for their actions, as well as teaching good communication skills, and always, always, always encouraging my students to ask questions, having to be prepared to shift from digital works and works on paper, and just building a community within themselves and feeling comfortable with me. All right, guys.